I was looking at this video today about Syria and how Syria is being. I was trying to put myself in their shoes. After many, many years of this conflict, I can't quite put my mind around why the United States is even involved in Syria or what they did or what they claim that the leader has done. But even if the Assad is a bad leader, it does not justify the level of violence perpetrated on the civilian population of Syria. Now, the United States under Obama hired mercenary groups, a lot of them Al Qaeda. They put together ISIS and Al Nusra as proxy armies in Syria to disrupt that state, a sovereign state that wasn't attacking anybody, was minding its own business. They concocted a bunch of lies about what Assad had done to his own people. Now, I don't know much about Assad. I know he was trained in, or he lived in England, and he went to British education system. He's from a wealthy family. I think his father was the president of Syria before him, and when he died, he kind of took power. Now, he might be a deceptive leader. I don't know. He seems to be fairly, looks like an honest and upright kind of guy on television, but it's hard to really say. I'll never forget these pictures I saw of John Kerry and him and both of their wives sitting at dinner, having dinner together shortly before Kerry was on television as the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State, talking about how evil Assad was as a dictator. But they always seem to blame the leader, or they punish the population for the failures of the leadership. So, of course, you always know that there's something else going on there. That's just not a credible argument. If you have a problem with leadership in a country, there's other ways to deal with that diplomatically. But to go in with your proxy armies and terrorist organizations to undermine the security of a country so that you can overthrow it and also bomb it from the sky consistently, that is just a treacherous act, and it goes against everything that America is supposed to stand for. Now, I don't believe that America stands for that, what it says it does. Hasn't for years, but I just wanted to talk a little bit tonight about what's going on there. But I also think that a big part of what's going on is this war is serving Israel's interests. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Israel and also about deception, public deception, because I think we live at a time of great deception, and friends of mine here on Facebook, you all know this stuff. I mean, pretty much it seems like everything we thought was true has turned out to be a lie. They've been constructing this narrative that has really captured our imagination, the public's imagination, for a long time, and behind all that is a real dark history, right? But the relationship between the United States and Israel goes way back. I mean, probably the Zionist organization started in the late 1800s or even before the mid 1800s, and it had a real stronghold of power in Europe, and a lot of people have argued that they created World War II so that they could justify establishing a Zionist state in the Middle East, in Israel. And so they controlled all sides of that conflict. It was sort of an orchestrated conflict. And then they started perpetuating this story about 6 million Jews dying in the Holocaust during World War I, actually. And before that, there's always been this story about 6 million. Jews being persecuted. And so this story has, along with the other narratives from the Old Testament, have really combined to legitimize what's happened in Palestine. But the intelligence service in the Mossad intelligence, really, since the 1980s, it's really been a dubious organization. I was reading part of this book by Ian Black and Benny Morris. They were talking, it's called Israel's Secret Wars, A History of Israel's Secret Intelligence Services. And a lot of people have connected Israeli secret intelligence services to ISIS, ISIS, Israel Secret Intelligence Services. Whether that's a good connection or not, or fair connection, I don't know. But the fact is that that's some of their tactics, right? They they hire a lot of terrorist organizations, probably ISIS and others, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, as a way to, they use these as proxy armies to do their dirty work and infiltrate countries and disrupt things and cause chaos, and so they can change the political dynamic. It's using terrorism as a method. And they did it on 9/11 to change the political discourse in America. But I wanted to just read this one paragraph by Ian Black, and then I wanted to talk about a couple stories I saw today in the news here, and talk about the relationship between Israel and the United States a little bit more, because I think that's such an important issue. As an American, I still love my country. I hate to see it being coerced and cajoled and really being the leadership being blackmailed and forced to comply with the Zionist interests in the Middle East. They don't have any, Americans pretty much just Israel's whipping boy, and they do their dirty work for him. Israel uses the American armed forces to do its own policy in the Middle East. So it's just tragic, all these people. I've known a lot of soldiers and military personnel, and it's just a shameful situation where they've been duped into believing that they're fighting for America's interests when in fact they're fighting for a foreign interest. Anyway, Ian Black said this. He said about Israel's intelligence services, he said, ingenuity, ruthlessness, and dishonesty have played their part in the history of Israel's secret service, as they have done and continue to do to a greater or lesser degree in the work of all intelligence security services everywhere. So not just Israel, but everywhere. But I'll talk about that in a minute. False flags. So for people who, this is Ian Black, he says, false flags can be used for recruitment. Agents can be blackmailed, pressured, and coerced. They can also be, and more often are, paid handsomely for their services. Dangerous enemies can be killed without any obvious moral qualms. Lies are told, at home and abroad. Denials may often be implausible, but the only crime is being caught. So, but for those who don't yet know what a false flag is, or you think it's just some kind of conspiracy theory, Ian Black's talking about, this is the situation where, like 9/11, you cause the terror, you instigate a terrorist attack, you inflict a terrorist attack on a country like the United States. You hit the towers with bombs, and then you blame it on your enemy, right? And then the propaganda machine takes place, and pretty soon the whole population's deceived and blaming a party that's not responsible for it, like the Islamic world, right? They blamed the 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia, allegedly. Of course, there were no hijackers because there were no planes used then. But the story is that the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And even today, people think that Saudi Arabia was involved. Now, their money might have been involved. I don't know, but Israel is the one that's pulling the strings with this, with 9/11. But false flags are used to for a lot of different reasons, a lot of political reasons. The main goal is to demonize your enemy by, causing a terrorist attack in their name, and then that justifies attacking them with everything that the U.S. military has, right, in their arsenal, and it worked quite well. I mean, even 17, 18 years later, people still believe that the Islamic world was responsible for it. But anyway, moving on from 9/11, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this article that I saw recently, and it's not a recent article, but this was back in 2012, and the headline, this is from Haaretz, which is a Israeli newspaper that can be quite this Israeli newspaper can be quite critical of Israel, but it says Israeli Mossad agents posed as CIA spies to recruit terrorists to fight against Iran. So back in 2012, Israeli Mossad agents posing as CIA spies to recruit terrorists to fight against Iran. So the CIA has a long history of recruiting terrorists to fight their wars, but this is Israel posing as CIA agents to recruit terrorists. All right, so this is commenting in this Foreign Policy magazine article that was critical of Israel. Of course, foreign policy, that's just that's pretty much the American establishment voice. But according to the report, Israel's recruitment attempts took place mostly in London, right under the nose of U.S. intelligence officials. So they were in London recruiting members of the Jundallah, a Pakistani Sunni extremist organization, to carry out attacks and assassinations in Iran, right? And then Foreign Policy says, it's amazing that the Israelis thought that they could get away with it. Their recruitment activities were nearly in the open. They apparently didn't give a damn what we thought. So, okay, so this is Foreign Policy magazine saying that they were surprised that Israel could think they could get away with this terrible thing, right? All right, but then later in the article it says, here's the quote. One intelligence officer, American intelligence officer, said, why didn't take any action against Israel, who was posing as CIA agents to recruit terrorists for assassinations in Iran. He says, in the end, it was just easier to do nothing than to, rock the boat, right? So so this is during the Bush administration this happened, right? And he's talking about the questioning the relationship between Israel and America. So he says, this is one intelligence officer told the reporter, there's no question that the U.S. has cooperated with Israel in intelligence gathering operations against Iran. But this one was different. No matter what anyone thinks, we're not in the business of assassinating Iranian officials or killing Iranian civilians. Okay, so the American establishment, who has a long history of assassinations and killing civilians, is saying it's drawing its lines with in Iran. But of course, we're being led into a conflict with Iran. But let me go back to this idea of Syria, because that's really what's going on right now. And apparently the U.S. intelligence officers and the Mossad are putting together a plan to inflict maximum damage via a chemical weapons attack in Syria. Here's a newspaper article from the TASS, which is a Russian news agency. It says Syria presents UN with data proving plans for terrorist chemical weapon attack in Idlib. Okay, so here we have proof, according to the Syrian officials, that, and the Russians backing it up, that the Americans and the Israelis are planning to do a false flag in Syria to justify further incursions into that country. All right, so I mean, that's just been the way we've all come to accept it. Most people don't even know what's going on at all. They'll just, one day they'll wake up and they'll see on the news that there was a chemical weapons attack in Syria, and then it'll be blamed on Assad, of course. And so we all know that's coming. They did this before about 4 or 5 years ago, but it was actually, perhaps it was a fake chemical attack. I'm not really sure. A lot of it was staged. Now they can do these false flags a number of ways. They're pretty good at it now because they've been doing so many of them over the years in the US and abroad. But so it could be a real chemical attack, and it could be with also a staged element where they bring in film crews and have crisis actors and stuff like that. But they do these for political purposes, of course. But this is one's particularly brutal because they've already been massacring people left and right for years in Syria, trying to break up that country for Israel. Because Israel wants a bigger country. I mean, that's really what it's about. The Greater Israel Project. You know, they don't like this little knife of a country that they have. It's not enough territory for them. They want to open it up and take over Syria, which, you know, Syria has been a country for, you know, it's been even before the time of nation states. It was you know, it goes way back in history. So it's you know, the Syrians they've been around a long time in that area. So they'll probably resist and they should resist being destroyed and undermined and dismantled systematically by the European Zionists. But that's what they're doing, and they'll move on to Iran as well, and they'll move on to. They've already finished off Iraq pretty much, and they're just going to conquer the whole Middle East. That's their plan, and subjugate the people, and then over time they'll systematically destroy them, like they've done to the Palestinians. You can see their pattern; it's pretty obvious, and they've done that in a pretty short amount of time. But I guess as an American, I just hate to see this continual deception, and I think it's just a permanent deception now. I mean, we're so far removed from any sense of truth that I don't think people even really know how to perceive truth anymore. And you know, it's funny that a lot of us have college degrees, and you know, I have a master's degree. A lot of people have PhDs, and a lot of, you know, we're really heavily conditioned to believe that we have to go to college and get all these years of education, but none of the education really matters because nobody seems to have a sense of how to discern truth from fiction, which is always strange to me, you know, like these fires in California. And I can't believe that people can look at these photos with years of science and physics and you know, I took some forestry classes, and you know, whatever your discipline is, we're all thought to be critical thinkers, and we have this knowledge about how physics works, supposedly, and but nobody can really engage and face these issues. They just want to be force-fed the information about what's going on, so they can't really see the fact that, you know, that these fires in California, most of them seem to be, you know, carried out through technological means. Because the news just keeps babbling on about the natural fires when the evidence in front of your eyes is quite different. And the same with the, you know, 9/11 issue. I mean, people still can't come to terms with it after 17 years, but the evidence is so unbelievably obvious that it wasn't what they said it was. But that's the power of the myth, I guess. And all of these, going back, all these school shootings, most of the school shootings, most of the mass casualty events, they're staged. And I'm just so skeptical, and I'm always looking for flaws in anomalies. And once you learn how to do that, you can really spot, fact from fiction. Not to say that I'm an authority on everything. I certainly make mistakes and read into things I shouldn't, maybe. But the fact is that they continue to do these false flags, false narratives, and the propaganda seems to keep churning out. So, but I'm just always surprised that people, in general, are not more aware. I guess people don't really care that much more about the world than just what's right in front of them. But anyway, I'm seeing this ongoing tragedy, like a tragic drama playing out in the Middle East, and it's going to be really dangerous. Russia has a lot of interest down there. China is not really interested. Iran borders China, and they're not really interested in having America and Israel dominate everywhere. No, I don't know. Israel probably has its hooks in all these countries as well, but anyway, it's a security risk for Russia and for China, so they'll look out for their own interests as well. So it just seems like we're being drawn into this conflict, and all these young soldiers that are thinking they're fighting for America, they're just getting led to their deaths in walking into a real catastrophe if sentiments don't change and people don't wake up to what's happening. Okay, well, that's all I had to say tonight. Have a good night.